What's up, y'all? We are going to do a GM 10 cut today, ignition. This is pretty standard, even though there's a bunch of different styles of this ignition. They're all pretty much standard as far as rekeying them. GM 10 cut stopped in about 2005. It continued on, but around 2005 is when they started phasing it out to the newer style. We actually have done this. We had a worn out ignition that we did on Saturday morning live 37, 38. Turns out that ignition didn't hold up. It was just too jammed up. They started having more problems with it. So I went ahead and ordered a new ignition. This particular one is a Stratec OE 703602 GM ignition in dash. This goes in the dash. There's a lot of them that go in the column. But again, as far as keying them up, they're all practically the same. So we're going to go ahead and pull out. And this you can do. These come with, most of them, a lot of them now come with these wafer kits. So in that video, I had my wafer kit out, which I do have a GM 10 cut wafer kit that we used for a long time. Has tons of use in it. However, everything you need is in the bag. So we're just going to use what's in the bag in case you don't have your own kit. And in this particular one, I'm going to talk about how I decoded this. Now, typically the problem is if we see right there, the key is a pretty worn out copy of a key, and that is what leads to the problems when these keys get worn out. So we're going to go over figuring out what the key cuts are, because that's part of the problem. The absolute number one problem with these is always the key. The key always wears out, and you start having to jiggle the ignition to get it to turn. And then when you're jiggling it, what happens is it messes up the chamber holes, these real narrow holes. What happens is this metal is not the greatest metal in the world, but as you're jiggling the key to get it to work, what happens is these chambers just will fold in on themselves and jam up, and invariably the whole ignition has to be replaced. Which again, we took apart that ignition on Saturday morning live and tried to repin it, but apparently it only worked for a couple of weeks. Come to find out, the customer had been continuing to use the old key, so that is likely why it froze up again. Anyway, long story short, we've went ahead and cut a new key. And again, the biggest thing on keying these up is knowing what our cuts are. So we're going to go ahead and move this camera straight over it so that we can see what I'm talking about here. And I need a pin. So GM 10 cut, obviously you have cuts. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now in a lot of ignitions, the 10 cut is not used. That's the case in this one. However, we do have to cut a new key anyway. So the number one step in doing that is figuring out how to read the key. And you can do that a little bit easier with the key blank. You go ahead and tip up, tip up, tip up. Now, any of the cuts that are in the key that are at blade height, in other words, not cut, are number one. So you always start off by identifying the tip, which is where it starts, and you ignore this part. You may think that's a cut. That's actually just the very tip. So our very first cut is this really deep one right here. And then we have, let's come back down. There we go, hold on. Then we have this one that's sticking up. And over here, now sometimes there's a 1 at the shoulder, and that will throw you off when you're counting. That's why it's a good idea to count backwards, because you may think this is spot 1 and this is spot 2, when in reality this is spot 1 and this is spot 2, so you can get thrown off that way. But basically, number one cut is a no cut. In fact, on my cutter, I don't even stamp it, I just skip it because it's the same height as the blade. And then obviously, just looking at it, we see this key here is right below that, and then there's one right below that, and then there's one right below that. So that's how you kind of gauge how deep those cuts are. So blade height, A little bit further down is a 2. And you see this goes down below this one. This one's below this one, so this is a 3. And then this one's below this one, so that's a 4. Now we see really wide spacing here and here and here. That means there's 2 of the same cut. You should never have more than 3 in a row. In fact, it's pretty rare to have 3 in a row. And I know the rule, so no more than 3 in a row. And also our max is 2. Oops, 2. So you'll never have a 1 next to a 4. That's not gonna happen. If you have a 4 cut, which is this deep one, and then a really high cut beside it, you know it's not gonna be this 1, it's gonna be a 2. So that's how you know what you can't have a 1 next to a 4. So those 2 rules help you figure out the key. Looking at this key, we see this very first cut right here is the deep, deep cut. So even though it's not used in the ignition, it's the number 10 cut, which is number 4. And beside that, we go up, not quite all the way to the blade height, but right below it. So we know that's 2, and it's wide, so that's 2, 2. So 2, 2. Then we have 1 that's lower, so that's 3. And then we jump up above that 2, so that's 1. So that's 3 and then 1. 3, 1. Here we've got another wide cut, and it's the same height as this, so 3, 3. And then we dunk down to 4 again, so we have 3, 3, 4. Now going by our rules, it jumps higher than the 3 there, so we know it's not a 1, it's got to be a 2 because it's next to a 4, and it's wide, so that's 2 and then 2. So we'll go right down here and go 2, 2, and that gives us all our cuts, which is 2, 2, 4, 3, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 4. And I've already cut it out on my machine, and you can see the difference there. I use an X-Acto punch to do this. If you hold this up next to it, it looks close, but what happens is there's just a little bit of minute difference there. Since this ignition works on a sidebar system, which is right here, it does have to be fairly accurate. So that's why the key may still work in the door and stop in the ignition, because as we put this together, you'll see how it's needs to be pretty accurate. So, and now we need to go ahead and pull our wafers out. Again, all the stuff comes in the pack that we need. If we pull out everything that came with it, we have a little white thing of goo. It is Stratec's recommended procedure to use that entire thing of goo. We're going to use that when we're done keying it. We've got the retainer and 2 pins. Now these 2 pins are actually not used in this lock, so we're not going to use them. But otherwise we have the cap that goes over the retainer, springs, and 4 wafer packs. We got 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's cut all these open and put them in a little container and start going through them. You can see we kind of flubbed that number 1, but that is okay because all the wafers have the numbers on them right there. So number 1. So 1, 1. This was 1, and we had a 1 jump over here, I believe. Mix your wafers up. Let's see number 4 there. There it is. That's where it went. I knew it went somewhere. And just verify. That's the number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 cap springs. Okay, when you get your ignition, it'll be just put together like that. So just turn it, and it drops out. Should be free to drop out. One thing I like to do is to check the sidebar, put a pick in there, and basically this is being pushed in by these two springs. So I just like to make sure it's free. It is, all right. And going back to our key and our numbers, if we remember what we had here. Again, you want to check to make sure by putting the key in. On this particular one, you could, you know, like highlight it or something so you could see it a little bit better. But I know that tip cut is a deep cut, and as I go in, we can see it, we can follow it going in, follow it going in, going in, going in, going in. And then here's our last position, and that's the tip, that's the 4. But as we push the key the rest of the way in, see there's the deep cut, push it the rest of the way in and it stops, and that is actually on that 2 cut. So we do know this is 1 through 9 only. At that point, we just get our start populating the wafers. This is a pretty easy part. Again, just make sure you're putting the right wafer in. It goes this way because this, well, it can only really go in there one way. But this angle right here, this is the notch that the sidebar falls in, and then this little one is a false notch. So what happens is that sidebar has a little angled thing, and when it goes down, it goes into that notch. This is pushing in and out with spring pressure. So if this is not in line with where it needs to be, it will not push the sidebar out. So push this in, we see the sidebar poke up there, and we just continue to populate the rest of the chambers. So I got 2, 2. Next was a 4. Double check that. Nope, that's a number 1. So that's why I checked the wafers, because that number 1 jumped out of the one spot into the 4 bin. So that key would not have worked, and we would have had to gone through to figure out why it was not working. So that's why. Take a glance at the wafers before you put them in. So there we go. Oh, I dropped one. That's okay. They send usually like 1 more than you really need, so in case you do just that. So pushing it in 4, 3, 3. Which double check. Yep, that's a 3. Nope, dropped that one too. I will reclaim these. Of course, I have a kit, but even though I have a kit, I don't throw these wafer packs out. I use the wafer packs to refill my kit. So I'm definitely going to go claim those 2 that I just dropped after the video. 3, 3. I'm going to try not to drop many of them though. 3, 3, and then 1. Let's see, yep, that's 1 right there. And next we had another 3. And then 2, 2, 4, which 4 we're not using. So push that down. And that 2, 2 is our last 2. Haha. Now the springs sit on top of these, and as I talked about in that Sat Live, before you actually cap it, it's a good idea to test it. However, it's very jumpy to do. It's very sketchy. And you can see now that we have all these down and in, the sidebars popped up. So we're going to get our springs and just set them on top just like that. Now again, I mentioned you can, after you get all your springs in, you can use the cap and press down upside down to test it if you think you're not comfortable with something. I don't do that anymore because there's a chance that your springs will go flying when you're testing it. You could use your finger, however, that can bend the springs, and you don't You don't want to bend any of these little suckers, like holding them down like that. So usually what I'll do is I'll just loosely put the cap on. If I have to peel it off, I've got replacement caps. If you're going to do this more than once in your life, it's really handy to have a kit. But you definitely don't want to push your cap all the way down until you verify that the key works. Okay, just lost a spring. Nope, it's still sitting here. We got lucky. It didn't go far. Once we get to the front right here, it gets a little bit harder to do, so I'm going to switch to tweezers for this one. Even though these are magnetic, and that drives me crazy, or magnetized, because you go and you try to put this in and the other springs come back with it. There we go. So here's our cap. It goes on a certain way as well. The little lip of the cap is going to go over this. See where the little legs go in right here and up here. Now if you did want to test it, you can, if you dare, you can take your cap upside down like this, kind of balance it on the springs. And it is a good idea to test this, even though it's a little bit dangerous to do. So there we go, I got them all pushed down. We're going to get our newly cut key and put it in and see what the sidebar does. It dropped down nicely, so we know that's good. And gently raise this up. Make sure we did not bend any springs. We did not. I'm going to turn this around just because it's the easiest way for me to do it. And drop our cap straight down. No, what are you doing? Oh, there is a little magnet in here, by the way. Let's see if we can do it this way. There we go. So, church. Get it all lined up. And I come in from this side and just make sure my springs are all doing what they're supposed to in there. And then I'm going to push it down. And here's where face cap pliers come into play. These are very handy for automotive use. If you do any automotive, or if you've ever done any automotive, you know how handy these face cap pliers are. So I'm going to squeeze it down as much as possible. Now at this point, it is a good idea to have a second set of hands, because I'm going to show you how to peen it down. And we're squeezing it down as hard as possible now, but that is not going to stay by itself. So the recommended thing has always been to, quote, peen it down. And we're going to do that with a flathead screwdriver. And basically, we're going to go to each corner, put our screwdriver right about there, and then tap it so that that metal kind of folds over. And then we do it on this corner, and then we do it on this corner, and then we do it up in this corner. And basically we're hoping to get, and then before you do any of that though, I always do tap it down just a bit harder. And as you put it on a vise or an anvil, in this instance to do that, you want to make sure that when you're doing that, you don't have any important objects poking out. But before we peen it, we're going to check it again with the key. Where'd the key go? We're going to check it again. So when you put the key in, that sidebar should fully drop. Key in and drop. Smooth drop. Doesn't go all the way down, but it goes down far enough for how it needs to work. Boom. Perfect. Perfect. And then you yell for help. I need a whacker! We need a whacker! We need a whacker! While you're waiting for your whacker to come up, you take apart this because, yeah, it's got some parts that we're going to need in there too. It's got several parts that we may or may not need. Some ignitions use them, some don't. I need a whacker! I need a whacker! Whacker!
I can't say it now that you have me on camera, but...
Right. Alrighty, here we go. We are gonna whack. You give your whacker a whacking object. Set the object down however you think you are not going to get whacked yourself. We're going to zoom in and say, all right, light and light. All right, medium and medium and medium. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Medium. Oh yeah, that needs a little bit more. Medium again. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Heckin' yeah. Heckin' yeah. Medium. Alright. Medium. And let's go about right there. Okay. Medium. Alright, let's see how good of a job our whacker did.
Whacker still has this in her hand.
Really, it's not the skill level of the whacker, it's the skill level of the person holding it. Now, come back.
Good luck whacking in the future.
Come back, whacker. I need you to whack one more.
No.
Whacker, get back over here.
No, you gotta change your statement.
Don't wave that hammer at me.
Change your statement.
The skill level of the whacker is dependent on things.
That didn't sound nearly as nice as what you were saying.
Okay, go ahead.
No,
You do a wonderful job whacking, baby. Whack that shit. Like, oh. Sometimes that happens, but that's okay. You just blame it on the whacker. Ah! Medium. Yeah, mediumer. Let's go up here and knock this down. Wait. Okay. Alright, before the whacker takes off and goes and does her own thing, you want to watch it as you're putting it in. You want to make sure it doesn't like rise up by itself. No movement, so that's good. Sidebar droppage, that's good. And you say thank you and take the hammer away from the whacker so that they don't get all physical with you. And lastly, we have all these little pins. And again, we don't use some of these. Some of these are only used for certain ignitions. This particular one does not use these pins. But it does use this spring. I don't know why they give you so many of these. I guess it's in case you lose them. I'm assuming so. Those are almost like Chrysler springs, but we do need this guy. You know there's no use for those pins because like there's literally nowhere to put those pins. But there is a place to put this pin, and that's right here. And it goes just like that with this spring behind it. So we're gonna hold that upside down, just like that. Drop it in here facing the only way it can go, like just like that. And then when we put it together, which we're not gonna put it together until we goo it up, so gooing it up. And I'll take the cylinder itself, just kind of squirt it off in there. Yeah, that's good enough for that. And smear it over your sidebar, just like this. I like to goop it down into this area. Now again, guys, I know people are like, I don't ever use that crap, but Stratex says I have taken a manufacturer course from Stratec on GM 10 cut, and they said, I don't know how joking they were. I don't think they were joking very much, but they spent a lot of money formulating this white goo, and it is entirely intended to be used completely. In other words, you use every bit of it in this little tube. They wouldn't send this exact amount if they didn't intend for you to use it all. So squeeze it all out, push it all around, and you're done. So we're gonna take that, make sure you don't drop your thing out, and we're gonna line up this notch. There's a little notch on here that has to be lined up with that right there. So we're gonna put it in, push this down, and wiggle it in the rest of the way. Now I do take this here, just so you should have some that pushes out, and I like to shove it down in the hole right there, so that as that turns, it'll coat the inside, and you can ease it down in there as well with a sharp pointed object. So all that goo is there for a reason, besides getting over everything. And there we go, you're done. Check it, make sure the key comes out, make sure it doesn't catch, make sure it's smooth, all of the above in this case. So you're good to go. That is how you key up a GM10 cut in dash, or any other one for that matter. Like I said, they may look different, but they all key up almost identical. Yeah. That about wraps it up on GM10 cut ignitions. I know I've done a video on that in the past, but I figured since I had to do this, I would talk about it again and do a slightly different video. Basically the same, but slightly different. Just double check your key a few times, and you're good to go. When you turn your key, you're able to push this in at a certain position. You have to have the key to get this out. A lot of people think that you can just pull the ignition out. However, with no key in it, the retainer won't go down. You got to turn the key to accessory or run, depending on the car, to get that to go down, so that you can slip it into the plastic housing. Anyway, there we go. GM10 cut ignition. Thanks for watching, y'all. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comment section. Loctite hand wipes. They're tough on grease and grime. This is straight out of the package. They look dirty. They're actually like a gritty clean. Doesn't really have a smell, but excellent for getting dried Loctite. Maybe. Ooh, that dried on there really well. But it does get grease and grime off your hands. Leaves your hands feeling a little funny, so I always go behind and wash my hands after I use them. But this really does take off graphite and crud and all sorts of white, gooey lubricant. It's not really brought to you by this, I'm just saying. These work great. If you ever have a chance to buy Loctite hand wipes, it comes in a 75 wipe container, pretty big container. Yeah, the lid, I've carried these around the truck. The lid does not come off too easily, so you don't have to worry about it popping off and drying out. So, yeah. Curious about the kit. We have spare little doodads, plenty of those. Springs, all sorts of rubber rings that I've really never needed. These go on the front of, I think, door cylinders. Spare caps, all sorts of stuff. So we continue to add to it with the stuff that I did not use. It's up there. We did restock our springs recently, but there we go. Number 4. That's right here. Number 4. Number 3. And number 2. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. Make sure and hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Also, there's a link up here in the top corner to subscribe to the channel. If you have not done so, make sure and hit that bell notification so you know instantly when we upload the newest content. Thanks again for being here. We really appreciate all y'all who watch our videos. So make sure and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you next video.